The easy part was deciding that they wanted to start a family. It wasn't something that they necessarily always planned to do together, but once they made up their minds, then they were all in. So the research process began, and they researched, and they asked questions, and they did some traveling, and finally they created the family that they have today. Today, I have the opportunity to introduce you to Daniel and Michael, two intended parents from Australia who found happiness in the surrogacy birth of their daughter with a surrogate in Canada. Welcome to the Becoming Baby Ready podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome, everyone. Today, I am speaking with a pair of dads south of the equator, not south of the border. And so it is morning for them, evening for me. Welcome, Daniel and Michael. Please tell me who you are and about the members of your family.
Hi, Sam. It's so nice to be here. I'm Dan. And who I am, I'm 42 years old. We live in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia, if you haven't worked out from our accent. It's a pleasure to be here. A little bit about our family. My husband, Michael, who will introduce himself shortly, and our recent addition, our daughter, Spencer Margot, who's 5.5 months old, born in Canada. But in addition to that, we have 3 French bulldogs and 4 chickens. So we have a very busy household over here in Australia.
You do. Wow.
And Michael?
I think you've introduced everything, but I'm the other half of the dynamic duo. My name is Michael. I am 39, almost 40 in September.
You've landed yourself an older man.
Never let him forget it.
I bet. I did the same with my wife. So tell me, you're in Australia. You decide you want to have a family. Was that a decision that the two of you made really early in the relationship, or was it something that you sort of evolved into over time?
I can answer that one. I've always wanted children. My past life, I studied a Bachelor of Education. I've always wanted to be a primary school teacher. I've always looked after family members. I just love kids, and I've always wanted kids. I think when Daniel and I got together, we've been together for how long now? 15 years. I would say it probably wasn't on the cards. We had very different perspective of life back then. But it was 4 years ago, I think. We were on holidays with some friends and families, and everyone around us is having babies, and everyone's got kids. There's little babies and children everywhere. And we just kind of decided, we just said, let's do it. Let's start a family.
There you go. Yeah.
Actually, I have a slightly different interpretation of that story because we discussed having children just before we got married. We got married in 2019, just shortly after the plebiscite, and they legalized gay marriage here in Australia. We were kind of one of the first marriages, actually.
Wow.
And one of the things that we talked about and introduced as part of our vows, with disclosure to our family as part of our vows, is our intention to have children. So we talked about that for the very first time during our ceremony, which was very special. So that was how many years ago? Six years ago.
6 years ago.
Excellent. And so how long did it take you to really fully jump in? And did you always know that you weren't going to be doing it in Australia? Because Australia, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of surrogacy in Australia, I guess I shouldn't jump the queue. Was surrogacy the route that you chose to go? And if so, how did you land on surrogacy versus adoption?
It's a great question. It took us a good year to really get serious about investigating stuff after we kind of mutually agreed that yes, it's something we wanted to pursue. And Australia introduces a whole heap of challenges in creating a family. I think we went initially down the route of adoption, which is super challenging. I think across the world, but has unique challenges here in Australia. And so then we started an exercise of exploring surrogacy, and we did initially look at what that looks like here domestically in Australia, and it is possible, although we don't have the same we don't have the same support mechanisms that exist here in Australia. So there's no such things as agencies, and it's all very much managed via social media. And of course, it's the age-old issues. There's more people seeking the help of a surrogate than there are, in fact, surrogates. And so, yeah, we then started exploring internationally, and that took us into a bit of a whirlwind actually, because I think one of the things that we've talked about in reflection is that there actually is not a lot of information available to intended parents and where to start. There's a bit of mixed information as well out there. And so we started exploring destinations where surrogacy was more, a bit more mature in kind of how you go about it, but was also aligned to our personal values as well. Like that was super important for us that we very much wanted to go through an altruistic surrogacy model and not a commercial one. Just from a personal values perspective, that was kind of one of the things that we agreed upon quite early on. So yeah, we went on this kind of exploration of information for a good 6 months, met with lots of agencies, lots of clinics, and kind of made our decisions from there.
It has to be a little bit easier now to do things like that from Australia to Canada or to Cyprus or to Mexico or wherever you're looking after COVID or through COVID, because agencies would have become that much more familiar with and comfortable with doing Zoom calls and things like that, getting to know you. You can ask your questions without necessarily having to hop on a plane and spend lots of hours and lots of money just to go and see an agency and then say, yeah, no, that one's not for me. Let's start this again. So I would think that in years past or in times past, people would have jumped in with an agency just because that's simply the one that they connected with first and it was already going to be expensive. You got the chance to do your homework and learn about the agencies and what structures worked best for you so that you could find that group that worked best, right?
Totally, totally. It's interesting you talk about COVID because we kind of initiated this journey around that time, and
during lockdowns.
I still reflect on, once upon a time, the thought of us even being able to create a family was like never even crossed our mind as being a possibility. And here we were during COVID, sending our samples to Canada via a big ice tank all the way from Australia. Like it just logistically, it just seems, so crazy. And what was medically possible during that crazy time, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, really, what else did you have to think about during lockdown? You might as well think about planning a family because you weren't talking to people or seeing folks, so you might as well just talk about creating a family, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Was the agency you worked with a Canadian agency?
Yeah, so we met with quite a lot of agencies in Canada. And again, it was a bit of a homework and assessment of personal values as well that informed our decision making. But we embarked upon our journey with a new fertility consultants, and they were wonderful in terms of our experience navigating through both our egg donor and surrogacy journey. Yeah.
So you used an egg donor that you sourced as a result of being connected to the surrogacy agency versus using someone that you knew. Is that right?
Correct.
That's right. Yeah, we've got a unique story as part of our journey. We had to get to the point of having wonderful Spencer in our life. Uh, we had two different egg donors and two different surrogates as well. And so both of that was supported through the help of an infertility. Yeah.
So what were the criteria that you were looking for when you were looking for an egg donor?
I think the primary one for us was obviously we wanted to emotionally be able to connect. And I think the one good thing that Anu does is provides really detailed profiles
Hmm.
of donors and surrogates and so forth. So that kind of gives you a bit of a snapshot into the person you're trying to connect with. But for us, it was obviously, and it would be for everybody, is medical history.
Right.
We want to, give the child or give our child the best start in life,
Hmm.
and that starts with medical. And so I think having that detail and that information available to us kind of gave us a good grounding on um, these are the type of characteristics or these are the type of things that we really want. But what really mattered to us was let's have a healthy baby.
It's interesting because when I've talked to, lots of other IPs in our community, over the years, particularly for people that are newly starting out, they quite often, when you ask them, what's your criteria for selecting an egg donor, they quite often refer to like physical characteristics as a first criteria. And if I was really honest, that was possibly where we were at initially when we first
Mm.
started, and we very quickly learned that in order of prioritizing what you're never going to get a perfect egg donor. In fact, no human on this earth is perfect, right? And we had to all really prioritize what it was that was most important to us. And for us, it was definitely medical history, and making sure we had the most healthy baby possible.
And that does make sense, especially if you're coming at it, if you happen to have a family history where you have, say, breast cancer or lupus or something in your family, then to have an egg donor who doesn't have any of that decreases the likelihood that your child is going to develop any of that, right? And so it makes sense that if you can make life easier for your child, then why wouldn't you do what you can for them, right?
Totally, yeah.
And I think that's one of the benefits of that we get, I think, going through an IVF type process is that we have so much more disclosure to that type of medical part of the world.
Mhm.
You think about other couples and we even think about our family and stuff, and they um, get pregnant, and they have a baby, and that's it. For us,
Yeah.
it's so much science behind it that there's all the testing that happens with embryos, so we know down to an absolute detailed level of even non-dominant genes that may be, picked up through myself and through an egg donor, which we had with our first egg donor. We both had non-dominant genes that came through, and that meant a loss of embryos as well because of the risk that posed. So I think that process we took opened up that whole world to us, and we weren't aware of that at the start. But I think that kind of supported us through that to make the right choices, or what we felt were the right choices.
Right. No, of course. And that's all you can do, right? Is you can make the best decisions and choices for yourself that you can make with the information that you have. But
Mm.
as you say, in this case, you have the opportunity to have a lot more information than many other people would have, right?
Yeah.
You had your first egg donor and there was a conflict then with genetic material. So is that when you said, okay, we're going to start fresh and go with another egg donor then and start the process of hunting all over again?
So we were matched with a really lovely egg donor who in fact was an Australian girl living in Vancouver,
Oh,
and we produced our first set of embryos. And the reason for having to engage with a new egg donor was actually a result of our match with our first surrogate, and we had three unsuccessful transfers, which left us with only two embryos after that. And of course, one of the things that we thought we were passionate about from the onset is that our bigger plan was always to have two children,
hmm.
and each of those children each of us wanted to have a genetic connection to, and we wanted them to share the genetic connection with the donor as well.
Right.
Um, and so only having two embryos was really challenging for having to want to match with another surrogate as well. So yeah, we decided that we would embark on creating a whole set of new embryos, and we did that match with a wonderful donor based in Toronto, actually, where you are.
Yay.
And the rest is history. Spencer's here, and we've got, I think, how many? We've got like 17 embryos in the bank, very high quality embryos in the bank. So who knows? We might have
Jeez.
17 kids.
Yes, keep me posted about that. I would like to know. You may end up using a couple of different surrogates along the way if that's the case.
Yeah.
So, and whereabouts in Canada was your surrogate based? Did you get a chance to be there for any of the appointments, or did she FaceTime you in, or?
A bit of both. So our surrogate is just outside of Calgary.
Okay,
Um, Beautiful location, close to the Rockies and not far from Banff, which is
nice.
absolutely stunning. And we got heaps of opportunities. We're really close with our surrogate, and it was kind of both. We've been there for appointments. We've visited during the pregnancy as well, which
Nice.
is special. And it was great that we had the opportunity to do that. But pretty much all opportunities that we could have with appointments, we were on Zoom or on Facebook Messenger, on WhatsApp, doing video calls. So we were pretty close to the whole process, which is wonderful.
I think I reflect upon like our whole journey, and I think the relationship that we shared with both our donor and our surrogate, I mean, they're different in terms of depth, of course, but the relationship we shared with our surrogate was like easily the best part of our experience. I
Yeah.
think very special, and in fact, we refer to each other as family now, so it was
Yeah.
a very special time, and still is. Yeah.
Generally speaking, when someone is a surrogate, that means that they have birthed children or at least a child before. So presumably your surrogate is a parent already. Do they have children? And if so, how many children, how old are children, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So our surrogate does have a child, a daughter, and they are 14, turning 15 very soon, actually.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
so yeah, so there's an established family, and we've had pretty close ties with them now as well. So we get on great.
That I just I'm so much of the mindset that it is such a gift for a child to grow up with a parent who is a surrogate so that they
Mm,
can see, especially in Canada or in Australia, where it's altruistic surrogacy, it's not a commercial process, as you know. And so these children are seeing someone do something very physical, very,
mm,
very demanding, very emotional, and yet so selfless because they're not doing it for themselves. They're doing it because they want to help someone else be able to do something that they've done and that they enjoy. And
mm,
I think those children are so lucky to grow up in that environment and learn something like that from their parents.
mm. It's so true. In fact, one of the most profound things I think I remember during our journey was our surrogate's daughter asking, or she disclosed to us that her daughter asked, does this now mean that Michael, Daniel, and Spencer are our family? And I thought, wow, how
Mm,
impactful is that? Because you're right, it's not just the experience with a surrogate, it's their entire family. And, in our instance, it was not only our surrogate's daughter, but her husband. And so it was just, it's a pretty profound thing. I don't think you can really ever truly explain the optics of going through a process like this and the relationships and all of the emotions until you've actually gone through it yourself. It's pretty profound
mm.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've gone through your two egg donors. You now are on your second surrogate. And how was that journey? Was conception fairly easy? You did one transfer and Spencer's here, or was it a rocky road?
We, it was a rocky road to get to where we are.
Yeah.
Absolutely, an exceptionally rocky road. I think that the blessing out of all of that was when we had our second surrogate. It was
Yeah.
first time conception, and it was rather quick as well from having egg donor embryos and then going through to a transfer and then confirmed pregnancy. All happened within the space of what, six to
I
nine
think
months or something. It was fast.
Wow.
I think we were creating the embryos in December with our donor. We had gone through medical clearance and screening and all of
February.
the things, and
Yeah.
we were doing transfer by February, all over the crazy Christmas period. So it happened very quickly. Yeah.
Wow. Because it can feel like you're just constantly in it, and then boom, all of a sudden,
Yeah.
It's
right?
interesting because I think one of the things that I like, we've reflected quite a lot on the highs and the lows of our entire journey. And one of the things that I think it's taught me is actually patience because I'm not typically, or particularly, I'm not all that patient generally in life. But I think one of the things that you have to learn going through this process is that things don't just work as fast as you would like, and so there's a lot of kind of waiting, and there's a lot of silent periods throughout your journey, and we just have to get comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a roller coaster. And one of the things Anu actually, which is really helpful to tell us at the start, is it's going to be a roller coaster. So it's kind of like there's all this flurry of activity. It's all crazy for a period of 2, 3, 4 weeks, be that medical clearance or a transfer or something, and then there's silence,
mm,
and then kind of nothing happens. So it's kind of like everyone gets hysterical. It's all happening, and then it stops.
yeah,
And you just have to wait, and then it goes again, and then it's all activity, and it's all crazy, and then it stops.
Right.
You have to.
yeah.
Now, did you have to do implications counseling through Anu as part of the process? I mean, in Canada, we have to do implications counseling. We have to, if we're using the gametes from a non-biologically related individual to create our family, then we have to do implications counseling to essentially make sure that we understand the the implications of how we feel and what that may mean for the child and what they may mean for us and all of those kinds of things. Is that something that you had to do, and is it something that you felt a benefit from doing?
We did do that, but it was managed via the clinic, via
Mm.
Create Fertility Centre, which is where the clinic that we used. So we did undertake that. I think that, yes, so we did participate. Whether I would say that it was particularly valuable for us, possibly not. It felt a bit more procedural than it did,
A tick box.
like a bit of a tick of the box as opposed to being valuable, if I was honest. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think it depends too on who's it's like any therapy, right? It depends on who's facilitating the therapy, and are they doing it because that's something that they have to do, or is it something that they believe in doing and making sure that everybody's okay all the way through, right?
sure, yeah, for
And I think
sure.
as well when we had that session, it was right at the start when we started the whole journey. So before we even embarked on having the first embryos created, so we were in a completely different headspace and understanding of what the process was and what it entailed and so forth. So I think we were going into it blind in a way,
Hmm.
not knowing. And the person that facilitated was lovely. But we didn't know what we didn't know, and so we could only answer what we knew. And obviously when you've been through it and you've understood it and you've seen how it all goes and stuff like that, you can have a different perspective and a different mindset. So
Mm.
Right, for sure, for sure. So, first try with the second surrogate, you conceive, and how was the pregnancy? Was that okay, or was it stressful? I mean, you're on the other side of the world, so already it's going to be at least a little bit stressful.
I'll tell a funny story actually because we the transfer happened in February and I traveled quite a lot for work. So I was in India at the time actually, traveling for work. And Michael was here in Melbourne, and we committed to each other that we weren't going to do any crazy obsessional testing in that 2 week window because it's not all that healthy to do that. And so we committed to getting on a Zoom call across these three crazy, crazy time zones, Canada, Australia, and
Oh,
India,
right.
to
yeah,
do our very first pregnancy test together via video call, and it kicked off like it went without a glitch, albeit I think Michael was a
I
bit
got the
bad.
short end of the draw. I draw the short straw, and I had the really crappy time of getting up. I think it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'm
Oh,
lying I'm lying in bed looking fabulous,
uh-huh.
sitting down half asleep.
So that was the start of, and we saw a positive test, and that was the start of, a wonderful. It was actually a good thing for us to do collectively together to
Mm.
start kickstart our journey. Our pregnancy was pretty smooth sailing. We did have a few bumps early on in the pregnancy. Our surrogate had a hematoma, and needed to go on bed rest for a week. But apart from that, we're very blessed that our surrogate's super healthy, super fit. She was doing all of the right things to kind of foster an environment for us to be successful. So We were very smooth sailing. There was no hiccups.
There was literally nothing.
In fact, the week before little Spencer made her appearance, our surrogate was like, we were going for like 2 kilometer walks and she was running up and down the stairs. And so
Going
like
to the zoo and
it was just,
yeah.
we're very blessed for a very smooth pregnancy for sure.
And I think that's the one thing as well. I reflect on the pregnancy period is our surrogate. It shows the character of the person as well. One, I think she loves being pregnant, and she just does pregnancy well.
Yeah.
But it kind of comes back to what is the intent or the purpose of wanting to help create a family, and so the intent is there, and it's just kind of just soaking up and then just enjoying the experience. And I think the three of us together it was incredible.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back. You know about babyREADY because you're listening to this podcast, so you know that we are all about queer family planning and helping you have the family of your dreams. But did you know that we don't abandon you once your baby arrives? We actually offer parenting coaching as well, and that's not just for the newborn phase, although we are there for that, but it's through toddlerhood and young children, tweens, and even through the teen years. When you need someone unbiased to lend an ear so that they can hear where your struggles truly are and help you come up with a path and a plan that feels truly right for you and your individual family, don't hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to be there for you. Visit us at www.babyready.info for more information. You were traveling for work and in Australia, and she's here in the Calgary area, and you leave your warm environment, I presume, to come to Canada in the winter. Like, did we think through this whole conception time thing?
It was cold.
Yeah, I guess it was cold.
Well, we're a little bit more sensitive as Aussies, right? We're not used to the brisk weather, but we did actually. We spent some time in Toronto with our first surrogate when we came out there to visit, and so the Toronto weather is much crisper than that of Alberta. So we had a bit of a taste of it, but it was bloody freezing. So cold.
So cold. Yes.
Yeah.
I loved it though. I would go for walks in the snow. There was periods where I'm just like, because I like to be outside, I like to walk, I like to go outdoors. And there was periods where I'm just like, I can't stay in the house. I have to put my headphones in, put 49 layers of clothing on, and go for a walk. After a while, I think I quite enjoyed the cooler weather.
We were a bit of a laughing stock of the local people in like our surrogate, her family, and the local neighbours and things, because we were the Aussies, like literally rugged up in what they would classify as kind of mild temperatures. Became a bit of a joke, to be honest. It's fun. Yeah.
My eldest child lives in Alberta, a little bit further north, just east of Edmonton, a little bit further north than where you were. But I spoke to him regularly this past winter, and I'm acutely aware of what the temperatures were like out there. And I can only imagine how you were navigating that when you're not necessarily accustomed to weather quite like the -30s.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. So how close to her due date did your surrogate birth?
1.5 hours before the due date.
Oh, okay. Well, you can't get much closer than that.
She was pretty
much bang on.
She was really truly on time, for sure.
So how far in advance of the labor did you come to Canada to make sure you were here?
I was a nervous person. I'm like, under no circumstances are we missing the birth of this child? And so I think we rocked up at like week 36 pregnancy, so very early.
But it was funny because I booked the flights and everything to come out, and then we were kind of talking to other IPs, and we're looking at stories on social media and stuff. And that's one of the great things with like Facebook groups and all that, is you get to understand the experience of others. And it kind of got us nervous, and we were just like, oh my God, we're not going to be there early enough. We need to change our flights, which we did. So we went a lot earlier than we had initially planned, but I think it was about a month before we were there, which is good. We wanted to kind of settle into life
Mhm.
and get ourselves settled, and spend time with our surrogate and the family as well before kind of it all kicks off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and things flip right upside down, right? So you might as well come and also it is a big time change. So to have time to the last thing you want to do is roll in at 38 and a half weeks and she births at basically 40 and you've barely gotten over your jet lag and got your days and your nights sorted out again.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was the birth a fairly smooth experience for you? No, it was probably fairly smooth for you.
I think one of the things that we spoke about quite early on in our match with our surrogate is her she she very much had a view on what the birthing experience what a good birthing experience for her looked like, and we very much aligned on that from the onset. And so part of that was having a home birth, which was a big thing to overcome for us because home birth in Australia is actually not a particularly common thing, but it is more common in Canada.
Mhm.
So it took a bit of processing for us, but we did in fact have the Spencer was born in our Airbnb that we had rented for the couple of months. We created a really beautiful atmosphere with fairy lights and a birthing pool, and it was just literally our agreed preferences for what that day looked like came off without a
Yeah.
hitch, and it was really quite beautiful. Albeit it happened very quickly, but much quicker than I expected. But it came off without a hitch. It was very beautiful.
Did you have a chance to attend some of the midwifery appointments beforehand so that because because that's going to assuage some of some of your concerns, right? If home birth's not something you're particularly familiar with, and there's lots of people I've met even in Canada over the years who just don't know much about it. So for them it feels foreign and not necessarily the best choice. But if you have the chance to meet the midwives and ask your questions, and in my experience with midwifery in this country, in a couple of different provinces that I know them from, the opportunity to have your questions answered sort of helps to calm your concerns and ease your mind so that it's easier for you to want to set up the fairy lights and the environment and really let yourself soak right into that whole experience, right?
It's so interesting you say that because I think it was like up until the point in which we were talking about birthing plans, like that was a good 3 years. We thought we knew everything, but of course we didn't. And it was through the conversations with not only our midwives, but also we took a parenting course as well, that enabled us to kind of, double click a bit. Like we'd had surface kind of level understanding of what plays out on during birthing, but we didn't really understand all of the details. And so I think that was so critically important for us because we knew exactly what we were walking into, what we could expect, the different scenarios, and it enabled, like the power of knowledge enabled us to show up better for our surrogate on that day as well. We didn't panic. We were very calm. It was it was perfect for sure.
And I think the relationship we were able to build with the midwives as well, they were just the most remarkable, lovely people.
Yeah.
So it kind of put us at ease and we had great trust with them as well. And I think that was because, back to your earlier question about appointments and stuff, we could go along to those. We could ask questions and the three of us could all sit there together and discuss our concerns and air anything like that. So I think we were able to go into it, fully prepared, ready, confident about what was going to play out.
Right. And one of the nice things with midwifery appointments here is that they tend to be extended. So you have typically a 30-minute appointment. So you feel like you're not, if you go in with questions, but you're not the one physically pregnant, in a 30-minute appointment, you'll have time to ask those. Whereas so often with standard obstetrical appointments with the doctor who's got such a long roster of patients that their appointments are so short, you feel like, oh, okay, well, you just get your questions answered because I don't want to take up anybody else's time.
We felt that they were very generous. And I think one of the things that we were facing into some of these appointments, we weren't sure optically how it would play out. And I think for us, it was so respectful of our surrogate and the role that she played, but also respectful of us as the parents. And so the dynamic of the conversations was actually beautiful, right? It was probably much better than possibly what we'd anticipated from the onset, for sure.
Your daughter's born, and now the process begins for thinking about taking her home.
Mm.
How did that play out? How was the court system? What did you have to do? What could you do? What couldn't you do?
It was a little stressful. A little. One of the things we did, and this is again, sometimes you go into things not quite understanding process, is that we had booked flights home. They were flexible to an extent, but we had booked them, and that was 1 month after the due date, which ended up being 1 month after Spencer was born. I think the process, again, the lawyers that we had were fantastic, and they were local lawyers in Alberta. Obviously, we needed to have Albertan lawyers to go through that process. But I think, like to what Daniel was saying earlier, it's that the art of patience, and sometimes you just got to put your trust in other people to get the job done. And for us, I think we were excited to go home, and so we wanted everything done in 2 days.
Of
And
course.
that obviously, an international law process and so forth is completely different, and we weren't involved in that, and we had to put the full trust in the lawyers to be able to manage all of that process.
I think one of the key ingredients to why our journey was so successful, I think, is the word trust. Like, I think sometimes IPs that we talk with now will say, what is the number one thing what's the advice that you would give us if we're just starting out? And that is, I've always said, you need to trust your team, and your team is your clinic, is your agency, is your lawyers. You need to trust your team that they're doing all of the right things in your best interests. And I think that's probably the key ingredient that made our experience so smooth. Notwithstanding the whole she's born and then we're trying to deal with parentage orders across 2 legal jurisdictions, and we're running the clock to the timeline to get home, and we flew home the week before Christmas as well, right? And so a delay would have not seen our plan of bringing Spencer home to meet her family in Australia for Christmas. It would have all fallen apart. And so Mr. Organizer here, I'm less organized, but Mr. Organizer here got us across the line. And we got on that plane.
I think we got our passport the day before we flew out. But it wasn't even just that, like having the passports and all that ready. And it is kind of like, what's next after that? Because when we come home, we had to think about naturalizing Spencer so she'd become an Australian citizen. What do I need for that? And making sure in the 4 weeks that we've got, that's organised. And then Spencer's going to need an Australian passport because she's still currently has a Canadian. What do I need for that? So it's kind of like you've got to think in the moment, but you have to think, what's next? Always kind of be on that front foot, because if we had come home and not thought about that, it would be not in a lot of trouble, but it would be quite difficult for us to continue on getting everything done.
I think one of the things that is, it was actually much easier. Whilst there's lots of steps in it, it was actually much easier than I anticipated. Even returning to Australia, and Australia is quite backwards in a lot of ways and not quite advanced, but we had her citizenship within 5 days of returning to Australia. And I'm like, what government ever works that quickly? It never works that quickly.
Especially around the holidays.
Yeah, it was super smooth sailing, much easier than we actually thought it was going to be honest.
And I think that actually comes down to the work that the lawyers did. So that we were able just to have absolutely everything in order, so that any applications, even when we're in Canada for passport applications and stuff like that, we're all just go, bang, here you go. Here is absolutely everything. Here's all the contracts. Here's all the legal agreements. Here's the court orders. We had everything. And I think that the team just did an amazing job to get us to that point, that we didn't need to stress about it. We could just get the job done, pick up the passport the day before we flew out, which is very stressful, but we had it, and get on the plane and come home.
And you were home in time for everyone at home to meet her for Christmas
We were,
Absolutely.
yeah.
and get out of the cold and get back to normal temperatures. So, two egg donors, two surrogates, surrogacy agency, fertility clinic, lawyers in Canada, lawyers in Australia, passports, and everything. Have you ever put a total on the number for all of it together as to how much it costs you to be able to have the daughter you have now?
I think the short answer is yes, it's horrifying to tell you.
It is.
One of the things that, one of the things that motivated us to even agree to come on this podcast is to kind of share our story to enable a little bit more transparency for intended parents or parents that are
Mm,
looking to embark upon a family. Because I think one of the things that we reflected on right from the onset is that I don't think our expectations were set correctly in terms of the financial, not just financial, but also the emotional
Mhm.
aspects. And we often as humans talk about sunny day scenarios, but we never talk about the scenarios around, needing to have multiple donors or multiple surrogates. And so our story is unique in that we were faced with some hurdles that are not typical, right? It's not typical for someone to have multiple donors or multiple surrogates. And so that of course contributed to a big bill, right?
Sure.
And so our total cost, I think, including all of the things, legal, agencies, clinics,
travel,
our travel, I
everything.
think I think in total we're probably nearing 300,000 Australian
Australian,
dollars. Yeah.
Right.
which is a lot more Canadian. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more
It'd be about
Canadian.
About 350 or
350,000.
380 Canadian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding, it's very our story and our journey to get there was unusual, right? It's not
Sure.
typical. But I do think that I said this to Michael actually not that long ago. I'm like, if we knew what we knew now back then, would we have even started? Like, of course, we had the fire in our belly to create a family was so strong, but yeah, $350,000 is a lot of money, right? For a lot of people, they couldn't physically, be able to come up with those types of funds. And
Mm,
so we were fortunate that we could when we had to refinance our house and do some crazy stuff to get there. But all worth it in the end, right?
yeah.
As soon as we had her in our arms, we were
Sure.
just like, we'd do it 1,000 times over.
And and at the end of the day, that's the universal message I hear from everyone is that, when you have your child in your arms, you wouldn't change any of it for a
Mm,
moment. You'll eat ramen for the rest of your life if that's what you need to do to be able to be
Mm,
parents to this child. And I fully get that. It is staggering. It is staggering. And it's part of why I've had financial planners on the show before because it really is something that it is absolutely it's unimaginable for most people to be able to think about that kind of a figure to create a family
yeah.
and and it is that much more for gay men who don't have a uterus amongst them because you have to utilize the services of someone who's willing to use their uterus for you and it's an elitist process when it feels to me like everyone who wants to be a parent should have the opportunity to be a parent. And we're going to put money towards all kinds of different programs in the world. Why can't we just also show the same kind of courtesy to everybody who wants to become parents? And I don't know. Like I say, it's a soapbox issue for me, and I get very frustrated by it. But it should be that you've got the love, you've got the kindness, you've got the patience, you've got the heart. All you don't have is the uterus. So
Yeah.
somebody help us out without making us, like you say, have to refinance your house in
yeah.
order to be able to have the family that you so rightly deserve.
I think what I agree 100%. I think one of the things that even today frustrates me a little bit, and I'm quick to jump on it. There's lots of like Facebook groups talking about surrogacy in Canada, and I'm part of most of them. And quite often when I see people, IPs ask questions like, how much can I expect my journey to cost, or how long might my journey take until I'm matched with a surrogate? And I'm very quick to jump on some of like people set the wrong expectations for a lot of people starting out in this journey. And so, I quite often see people quote, oh, between 60 and 100,000 Canadian dollars. And I'm like, there is no chance, even in a sunny day scenario, with all of the things that you're going to create a family. So I'm really passionate about making sure that people starting out on this journey, exploring, like the expectations are set correctly up front. It could be devastating if you're in the process and you physically don't have the way and the means to be able to, follow through on your
Continue.
obligations as well, right?
I
100%.
think this is one of the challenges for international IPs, and especially because if we think about the process in Australia, every state or province has a different law, and it makes it very, very challenging. But every state in Australia has different laws, and it's very, very hard for us to kind of go down a surrogate route. It's either a friend or a family that needs to offer, and again, like Canada, it's not commercial. And so for international IPs like us, we have no choice, really. We have to look elsewhere, and that's why we went with Canada. And I think to Daniel's point about setting the expectations is that we see comments where people are like, oh, yeah, it's $60,000. And that's just not true. It
Right.
doesn't work out like that. There's always going to be bumps, but it's kind of like we also see comments where people would say, but it's not commercial. It shouldn't cost that much. But at the end of the day, there's so many factors that contribute to costs, and I think at the end of the day, it's just having that upfront conversation about, yes, this is what an ideal journey looks like, and
Sure.
this is what you expect from it. But what you need to be aware of is there is going to be possibly some challenges you may face, and this is what the impact may be.
And anytime we set out to change something substantially in our lives, whether we're doing home renovations or facing a big move or growing our family, to listeners, there is the most beautiful child on the screen in front of me, and you just can't imagine how gorgeous she is. But anytime we set out to make monumental changes in our lives, everyone says have a contingency fund, because no matter what you budget, it's going to go bigger than that.
Yeah,
And this is no different.
we totally agree. And that again is probably one thing we didn't think about at the start because we weren't made aware of it.
Right.
And a process that we had to undertake and which is completely foreign to us at the time was that we actually needed to, on top of refinancing houses and stuff like that, we got to a point where we just had to explore other options because we were just like, we are so far into this and we need to unlock funds. How? Like we've exhausted pretty much all the methods that we can, and thankfully we were able to find a different process with our taxation office where we could use our retirement funds essentially, so our superannuation that we have in Australia, to be able to unlock that to fund some of it. So it's kind of we were going right to the scraping the bottom of the barrel to go, how can we get these funds? Because we weren't anticipating that we'd need a new egg donor. We weren't anticipating we'd need a surrogate. We weren't anticipating that we have all these extra costs that we weren't made aware of coming up that you have to pay it. Like you can't just not pay it.
It's interesting because we should talk about that a little bit because it's like you talked about, the additional challenges that comes with, two gay men not having a uterus and being able to produce a baby. It's like I went in Michael's reference to, the taxation officer and us looking to obtain funds early from our retirement fund in order to fund part of our journey. I went in with a big fight to the Australian Tax Office because their legislation supports that of a heterosexual couple going through an IVF journey. And their ability to access superannuation to fund IVF journeys is within the legislation. But of course, when we went there as two gay men, we were rejected, and I went through a pretty big fight with the Australian Tax Office, of which we were successful. But I'm proud of that because it's kind of set a precedence in Australia, and through me challenging that, I've also helped other Australian-based intended parents navigate the complexities of being able to obtain funds via the tax office. So I'm proud of that. That's one of my things that I'm like, if I take a legacy from anything in this journey, it's being able to, fight the system for what's fair and what's right for everyone, right?
100%, 100%. And it shouldn't, you know, if at first they don't take it into consideration because it's not something they've thought of before, then that's one thing. Now you've
Mm.
thought of it. Now you know. So do better. Make the
Mm,
changes across the board. Don't make anyone else fight the fight. One person's done it. Now we know that we need to have different rules in place. So just change the rules. Don't make everybody fight tooth and nail. You've got a beautiful little girl. You're supposed to be dedicating your extra time to parenting this child, not have I got all my paperwork in order so that we can get what we rightly deserve.
totally. I think one of the things that we also have reflected on our journey is like where we obtained our information from as well. Like I think like one of the things that I would certainly encourage other intended parents to do is use the communities that exist. Like take the information from the people that have walked the path that you're about to walk.
Mhm.
And I think that was our greatest source of knowledge is,
Mm.
connecting with other intended parents at all different stages in their journey because, they bring an unbiased and very real perspective. And so, I'd certainly really encourage new people setting out to do that. There's a big community out there for
Mhm.
sure.
And
Mhm.
ask for help as
Yeah.
well. Like if you don't know,
Ask
you
for help.
and ask for help, then I suppose that's the good thing about social media, has its flaws. But
Sure.
one of the great things about social media is the community that it does create. And so that does open up other avenues because agencies and lawyers and stuff, at the end of the day, they're a business
Right.
and they have to be paid and they're going to tell you what they need to tell you. Um, but being able to connect with other people and other intended parents through social media and through other online communities and so forth, it kind of opens up these doors to um,
Mhm.
new perspectives and what ifs and can you help me understand and so forth.
Mhm. No, no, it's very true. It's very true. It has its flaws, as you say, but it can provide a resource, and that's ultimately full transparency. That's how we connected is through social media to make the determination that we wanted to connect and chat so that we could share your story, so that people could hear the wisdom that you have to share because you have the lived experience.
People often ask, talking about social media, they ask, why do you have this Facebook or this Instagram page, and why do you share your story so transparently? And you know, for us, it is about like we feel an obligation to share our story, to motivate, to inform other people walking in our path. So our intent of speaking with you today, or speaking on, or sharing our story on social media, is to share knowledge because I think knowledge is power
It
for
really
for
is.
anyone wanting to embark upon this. It's super powerful tool, right?
It
Yeah.
is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now you have a young one in your arms and she's been remarkably happy considering she's like, I'm awake and I'm just really sitting here hanging out. Before I let you get on with your day with your daughter, please tell me what is your very favorite part of parenting this sweet angel?
So I can go first on that one. At the moment, I'm staying at home,
Hmm.
so I've got time off work for the moment. I do go back to work in July, and then Daniel's on parental leave. Um, for me, I think being home full time, and a lot of parents will get this, is the 2 a.m. feeds. They're getting up in the middle of the night. It's rough. It's really rough.
Hmm.
Broken sleep. But I think for me, my favorite thing is definitely, yeah, when I was getting up at 2 o'clock, giving her a cuddle, giving her a feed, and then just having silence of just us sitting there having a cuddle with my grandma blanket on my lap on the chair, and and she's it's a dream feed, so she's asleep.
Yeah,
So I'm just like you are going to have all the cuddles in the world, and there's just no distractions. It's just I love it. I love it.
I love that. I love
And I'll
that.
answer that question, but before I do, I'll say she's actually quite engaged. I think possibly because of your accent, although you'd probably decline like deny it was an accent, but she
Like
sounds
I
like
know that.
sounds like
Does
Auntie Zoe, huh?
oh, does it sound familiar?
I think for me, like no one ever really prepares you for. parenthood, right? Like everyone will tell you you're going to be tired and it's challenging and the newborn trenches and all of the things, but nobody really prepares you for it until you're in it. And I think the thing that's been so profound for me is how quickly she's grown and her development. And so, like every day we wake up and she's demonstrating a new skill, or she's doing something differently from a development perspective. And I'm just like, it's hard to describe as a parent, that love that you feel, and the admiration and how proud you are. Like she literally is the sunshine of our day every day. And quite frankly, the best job I think I've ever had in my life and the greatest achievement, right? You can't explain that.
No, I fully agree. I fully agree. It's just...
There was a cute moment this morning. We were sitting there, we're having our coffee, sitting in her room, and I was on the chair with my blanket, and Daniel was on the floor with his coffee, and then Spencer was just sitting next to us, and she just turned to Daniel and smiled.
Yeah.
And it was like the most innocent smile, and we looked at each other and we're like, "Oh my God, this is just the cutest!" And it's just the innocence of it all. I think that's what the best part of it is. It's just, we go and wake her up after a nap or in the morning, and she's just such a happy baby. Like, she just smiles.
Yeah.
And it's just the best.
That is the best. That is the best.
I did say to Michael the other day, I'm like, I don't actually know what we did with our time before having a baby. Like, what did we do? I don't know.
It's very true. It's very true. They do consume all your time, and you wonder how you lived before them. Thank you both so much for taking time out of your morning to chat with me today. I sincerely appreciate it, and for letting me see this precious, beautiful girl.
Such a pleasure. Thanks so much, Sam.
Loved it. Thank you.
As a queer individual with colonial lineage, I want to first acknowledge the land upon which I live and work. Being from what is now known as Burlington, Ontario, I recognize the original ancestry of these lands as they span from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment and beyond. These lands are steeped in Indigenous history that benefits my community every day. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I stand is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land dictates everything about our ways of being. Particularly, the land teaches us about fluidity. Concepts of the binary system and heteropatriarchy were imposed by the colonials who were, at the same time, removing children from their homes, families, and all that was familiar to them. These same children were divided by the only two prescribed binaries recognized by the settlers, and they were forced to conform to a performative, gendered falsehood. The land doesn't operate under binary thinking. It is diverse, complex, and unpredictable at times. Rather, the land holds us and all of our remarkable paths and identities. Every organism and spirit has a purpose. It is from this understanding that I strive to live and grow. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.